So those fuel price hikes that kicked in at midnight, undoubtedly they're going to have a knock-on effect on our economy. Higher prices all round with the cost of transporting goods to our supermarket shelves. Let's discuss this and other road-related matters with Gavin Kelly, CEO of the Road Freight Association. Gavin, thank you so much for joining us. So diesel went up by a whopping R1.43 a litre. That's almost 3 times higher than what petrol went up by, which is around 51 cents. That's a lot. Is it a real concern for your industry because most trucks are diesel?
Oh, good evening, Sally, and good evening to all your listeners. It's really a major concern for us. We read it with despair, and I think there are some very dejected transporters out there. Over the last 2 years, we've seen the price of diesel increase by 100%, and for anybody in any sort of business, if one of the major costs or expenses of running your business increases at a rate or a margin like that, you've really got a problem, because you've got to try and find a way to cover that. And obviously you don't want to run your business at a loss. So now what's happening is transporters have to do one of 2 things. Well, I suppose there are 3 things on the table, really. The first one is just to call it quits, close their doors and say, look, we can't afford this. And a lot of that is driven through the way in which transporters are paid. So you and I would like to go and buy something, and when we buy something, we pay for it immediately, or maybe we pay it off if it's a large item. But generally, transporters don't get paid immediately for the job they've done. They could have a 30-day or even up to a 90-day period before they're paid. And when you want to move something, you've got to buy fuel. And of course, you now pay for that fuel. You need those reserves. So that's the first thing, is that transporters need to find a way to keep funding their fuel purchases while they wait for their revenue to come in for the jobs done. That's a big problem, especially for the smaller guys. They just don't have those resources. They have been literally wiped out financially through the COVID and the various other things we've seen in the country, like the protests.
Absolutely.
So, right for them.
And you said that's the first thing. You said there's 2 other things that can happen.
The second thing, yes, sorry, I thought you were going to ask me a question. The second thing is, all right, pass on this cost. Okay, I can try and absorb the cost through some ways of changing my business. So, for example, I could find other routes. I could use smaller vehicles, but smaller vehicles don't always work if you're looking in terms of fuel consumption. And I can try and change the way in which I operate. So I might try and find agreements with other people moving goods along the same sorts of routes, or try and find those synergies that don't always work that well. I could change the technology I have, buy more fuel-efficient vehicles, but I need the capital to do that. The last way of going about doing this, and this is what we are going to see across the board generally, is going to be, well, I need to pass those costs on. So I need to go to the clients, my customers, who are giving me things to move on my trucks, and I'm then going to say, sorry, it used to be, and I'm just using round figures just for the discussion, It used to be a kilometre, now I'm going to have to charge you R2 a kilometre. And that price will go through to the customer or the client, and then you and I will pay that increase.
So how long does it take for that cost? So let's say that the increase that came in at midnight, how long? Is it immediate? Do they go, well, we have to pay much more now today, so we're passing the cost on immediately to you? Are we going to see the impact within the next couple of weeks, or does it take a few months?
I can give you a good South African answer, yes and no. So those transporters who don't have contracts, who run day to day, so we'll go somewhere and look for a job and run tomorrow. Let's say the price went up last night, we'll run tomorrow. They will then charge the new fuel price, because they buy fuel at a forecourt, what you and I would call a garage, and they run literally, we say hand to mouth. As they run, so they charge. There are some operators who might be lucky enough to have contracts that stipulate a medium price for their fuel, so they would run for a couple of months, depending on how long the period in their contract stipulates that they must run before they can change the fuel price. So that's why I say it's a yes and a no.
It makes sense, actually. And it also makes sense that we might see a bit of a lag, because, of course, we're running up to the festive season where everyone wants to spend more and have a celebration. Speaking of the festive season, and this has been the case for a while now, we have a lot of trucks on our roads, primarily because our railways are not functioning properly. this festive season, we're going to see a lot of holiday makers on the roads. We've already seen horrific accidents involving reckless truck drivers. The Pongola situation seems to be one of those, where those school children died. What are you expecting on the roads this festive season in terms of truck activity? What should motorists going on holiday be aware of?
Well, in the past, we tried to, in the trucking industry, do a lot of movement before those traditional 14 days over the festive season. So especially in terms of retail, we tried to fill up all the regional depots or the regional warehouses of the various retailers to make sure stock was in the shops. And we then also generally, the transport industry went on holiday from the 16th of December. There were those loads that kept going that obviously in the heady days of COVID we called essential goods. So the foods and the medicines and what have you would still run, but the volumes would be down. What we're seeing now is a lot of mining material that is moving to ports, and I don't think that is going to quieten down as much as we would like it to quieten down. So really, anyone who's going to use the roads must take a couple of things into consideration. The first is that they need to really study the route that they are going to be driving on and get information from social media as to what the traffic volumes are and in terms of different types of traffic volumes. So are there lots of trucks on the route? Secondly, it is always more dangerous to drive at night, so be very careful about driving at night. Vision is always impaired, and that's generally from lights coming towards you. Look at what the weather forecasts are. Try not to drive in rain, and especially in routes where lots of trucks travel, you have a lot of that mist rising. And then finally, leave in good time so that you don't end up trying to drive long distances and you're always exhausted towards the end of that trip. Find places to stop, but leave in good time so that you can make that travel, that route, as safe for yourself and your family as possible.
Such important advice. We really need to be thinking about that, particularly with the amount of trucks on the road. You're explaining that there is still going to be a fair amount of them on the roads this festive season. Thank you very much, Gavin Kelly, CEO of the Road Freight Association.